So again, I talked a little earlier about, as we were brainstorming kind of what webinar sessions would make sense, one of the topics that came to my mind leading this team was that, we don't talk a lot about content or substance. We'll talk about that later. But what is content? That's the first thing. And you need to tell your own story. At the end of the day, content is not just about kind of what you know about the business acumen and the world itself, but your story around how does that content relate to you? How do you solve problems going forward? Don talks a lot about kind of providing a solution to, issues that a company might have. How do you use your content for that? And then practical tips on how to develop content strategy. What does that mean for each one of us? And then what do we do as executive coaches to help you to do that? All right. So any questions, please feel free to drop in the Q&A. So what does it mean to have content in your profile? Well, first of all, why is it important, right? So if you think about a traditional definition of content might be developing and managing substance and insight to generate leads and meet your marketing goals. Now, a lead is not someone who just, a salesperson cares about. It really is about opportunity, right? So if you are part of the finance department, et cetera, and you're looking for a lead, you're really looking for an opportunity for an audience to maybe talk about your P&L or talk about your financial statements or capital planning. But that idea is that if you don't have content behind that, no one's really going to give you credibility or time of day, right? So that definition is there traditionally, but then how do you translate that to you as a person or candidate? It's finding ways to have substance and insight. And the question is, does the way that you market yourself through resume or LinkedIn, otherwise, does that reflect or communicate the substance or insight, right? So we'll talk a little bit in a second about, what to do, what not to do in certain situations where if I present something to you that's sort of flat and kind of, I know certain things, and these are just kind of, well-known things that are superficial, but Don comes in there and starts saying, well, here's the issue, but here's why I'm uniquely qualified to help you solution that. That's a very different, feel to it. And Don, feel free to jump in whenever you like to. I have a question for the audience at this point. What does content mean to you, right? So as you present yourself, what kind of content do you want people to know you for? Right? Are you someone who's curious, someone who is really solution oriented? What is it that you have there? I'd love to hear from you. So let's keep on going here. Now, what happens if your profile lacks content, right? Well, companies know right off the bat, they have a sense of your business acumen. So before you even meet anybody, before you even speak to anyone, when they look at your LinkedIn profile, when they look at your resume, when they hear about you through, let's say, word of mouth, they will immediately, a good hiring manager, a good sort of C-suite will know, does this person have content and substance behind what they have to say? Is it worthwhile giving them half an hour of my time, right? So the question is like, do you know your market? Do you know their market, right? They can quickly tell it, because what you decide to put on your resume, if it's irrelevant completely to their company, they'll know where your head is at, right? They'll know whether you have the content that they need. Based on your experience, things like, what icebergs do they need to watch out for and avoid? This comes up in conversations a lot. So I have a lot of clients, and I know Don does, who talks a lot about having a networking event, right? Where you're introducing yourself, you're kind of telling people what you do. But if you have a perspective or a point of view that says, enough about me, here's kind of briefly what I do, but I'm concerned about your market, right? I'm concerned about what you guys might be facing. This is what I've been thinking about and reading about. What do you think, right? And those are kind of conversations that show content, that show substance, and only why you're the one to solution that, right? So do you have substance, or do you stick to the superficial? So one example that I have been really focusing a lot on is artificial intelligence, right? We had our last webinar with Mike Lorelli about boards, and that was a great conversation. And the topic of AI came up, and it was talked about that, you should mention that, right? Whenever, just so people know that what it is. But it would be really good to take that one step further and say, well, AI probably is going to affect you in this kind of a way. How can I help you, right? How can I be that person that helps you? So last thing there is, without content, your resume, your LinkedIn will the depth, right? That's needed to capture the attention of a recruiter. Don, I have a question for you here. So is this something that you see often? Like, how do you coach your clients around developing content so that people can see that you're a substantial person, right? You're just not kind of like a, lame business person. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a key question. Every one of you out there knows how much it costs to replace an executive. It's roughly 3 times the annual salary. What I want to hear from you in your content, it has to be 100% ROI oriented, and you must tell me how you are going to make me money. That's your brand.
Right.
Yes, and Simeon has it exactly right. I need to focus what I'm saying to you based on your needs. That's the bottom line. If you don't tell me how you're going to make me money, I don't have time to look further than that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And in some ways it is kind of going back to the adage of what's in it for me, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a transactional conversation that needs to be had. And that's really the point of an interview. But Don, what you're saying is you need to kind of show them based on your experience, your knowledge, how smart you are, right? How can you make them more money, right? And make them more successful. Okay, all right, let's keep on going here. Thanks, Don. All right. All right. So what do we mean by content? As we're thinking about this, you might be asking like, what is that? What are some examples of that? Where does it come from, right? And again, any thoughts or comments, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. But there's three things that came to my mind, at least, as we were thinking about this together. There's three areas that kind of drive content: your experience, right? So what's the situation, complication, action, results of some of the things that you've done before. And from that kind of account that you give, people get an idea for, how do you deal with, stressful situations, right? How do you act upon certain situations to impact, people, process, technology, and what were some of the results, right? So if you take pride in your experience, they're going to take pride in you telling the story. And then they can sort of say, well, I can see, Don, how does Don fit into my leadership culture? How are they going to bring me success, right? They can see that. Number two is your expertise and value proposition. So that's slightly different than experience, because experience is sort of a storytelling approach to here's a situation. Expertise are, transferable skills, things that you are really good at, right? But more than that, it's actually transferable value. You need to show people why you're valuable, right? And that goes beyond your expertise. That goes into applying expertise into a situation and having good judgment, having good discernment, knowing how to lead people, right? Identifying people and how to, like, what is that value that you bring that no one else does? Because Don and I might have exactly the same capabilities, but he might be really good at rallying the right team together to achieve a goal, right? So that's another thing about content. You need to show people that element of things. And then your thought leadership. So this is a really big one for me, because I use LinkedIn a whole lot for myself and I use it for my clients. I always talk about this as being, this is a free marketing tool to you to potentially, how many people are there in the world on? But a lot of people, right? So anybody who has LinkedIn profile and can type your name in it is going to be able to see something there. So what better can you get? But your point of view is important. How that links up is it's also a forum for you to show people how you think and what you think about, right? So if you care about things that they care about, then you're substantial. They want to hear what you have to say, right? So three things there. Don, would you add anything else when you think about content and having some substance with your clients?
I think you have that covered very, very well. Again, what you're doing is you're actually demonstrating your capability, and it's 100% ROI based. What you're saying is, if you bring me on board, you will see me do these things. For example, let's consider a chief operating officer. What you're saying is, if you bring me on board, you will see how I can transform your CEO's vision into profits. Very
Right.
well focused. And the nice thing that you're doing here is it's a conversation.
Mhm.
When you say, these are the things that I can do, then you can wait. And
Right.
they'll come back and say, okay, well, let's talk about my particular company.
Right.
That's that value proposition are actual actions that you will take. If it's a collection of nice sounding adjectives and responsibilities, those are not your intention. Those are the minimum standards. I wouldn't hire anybody who could not do those things.
Right. Yeah. And we'll talk about that in a second, about how that's actually more of a job description than it is about you. Yeah. And the awesome thing about this topic today is that it really kind of drives towards networking, right? It really it at the end of the day, again, we'll see in a second, is that what has to go somewhere. And so it's going to dovetail into networking. That's a big topic that our clients are always asking us about. All right, so let's do a little bit of deep dive into content. So when I said earlier about your experiences being one of them, now I apologize in advance for the font size, but if you could squint, that'd be great. My main point here really is about a job description versus your experience, right? And to your point, Don, it's no one cares about the left. No, really, to be very honest with you, in my corporate days when I was recruiting, and I don't speak as a recruiter today at all, but I know for a fact anecdotally that as a recruiter, I couldn't really care less about what you've done in the past as far as these particular bullet points, if you look at the bottom left there, because each one of them are almost irrelevant to one another. And so I call it often that, you hamburger stack sort of patties on your resume year over year. And you just accumulate like a report card of different subjects, but they don't relate to each other, right? It's a job description. You better be able to do these things, right, Don? You flip
Yep.
it on its side. If you flip it on its side, it's basically a job description. But the right side is really trying, and I'm not saying this is perfect, but this is telling you about your experience. in the sense of what's the context of some of these things that you've done, right? So you really try to write it more as a narrative. And it starts even before that. It starts with a LinkedIn profile. People get to know you. They understand kind of what you're about. But then when it gets to a resume where a recruiter actually finds your resume, then to help them understand what your experiences are and what they've driven out, you should really focus on what's the storyline behind all the things that you've done, right? And that might result in, the right side. It might be a little bit too wordy, that one. I would probably shave it down a little bit, but it's really giving some narrative around that, and that shows people your experience and what that does, right? And then what about your expertise and value proposition? So I use that word a lot, value proposition a lot. Don has other examples of that, and I really like what he has to say about that. But my main point here is it's transferable value. Content is about value. Content is not about knowledge or data or numbers. Content is about you as a person. It's about your agility. It's about your personality. It's about how you work as a team. And so what's a unique value proposition? It's a concise statement that summarizes what makes you different than other candidates. And it better not be that you just type faster, right? It better not be that you can see further, right? Like those are not things that separate you, even though that might be true, right? But that's not what a value proposition is. And then it should highlight your strengths, passions, achievements, and benefits that you can bring to target your audience or employer. So the benefits is exactly what Don was saying is why should a organization hire you on? Are you going to help my life, my company, us, our bottom line, right? What are the benefits that you can show if you bring your value over? Components of a value proposition. So now we get a little bit more specific because the clients will ask, how do you write one, right? So what are your skills? What are some skills that you're passionate about? When I say passion, it's not a feeling. It really is just about what do you love to do that you want to do more of? If you could write your own job description and it would just be all about those two or three things, right? So what are you truly passionate about? And it can't be about all 5 or 6 things that you do today. What impact do you want to have, right? So whom do you want to impact? And what problems do you want to solve? So, you spend probably the first 2/3 or half of your career acquiring and learning, but the other, the sunsetting phase of your career really should be about giving back, right? It should be impacting. So what is that? And then what are your personal non-negotiables? So to yourself, there's always a sandbox that we play in where we can build castles, right? But beyond that sandbox, there's certain things like, shouldn't be there or they must be there to help me succeed. What are those? Like that's important to you. And give an example of that. I'm a finance executive. I'm skilled at these things, and I got them. But this is Don's example, right? But I do more than guard against unpleasant finance surprises, right? I do more than that. I'm the happiest when I provide C-suite team all the financial tools they need to build, profit, and exploit opportunities faster and better than our competitors. Now, I don't know about you or anyone in the audience, but if someone came up to me and said that, I would remember them, right? Because what they're saying to me is not just stopping at that first bullet point that I'm good at these things. They're saying what they're happy about. They're saying what they're passionate about. They're saying that they would do it almost for free. Not that they would, but but they're gonna, what's beyond that number, right? It's just, I'm doing more than guarding against unpleasant finance surprises, but I do more than that, right? I equip you, etc. That's like that. Don, any comments about that or anything that you would add?
You'll notice that the value proposition is really a template for outstanding conversations, including the interview. Look at that bottom paragraph. It says, I'm happiest when I'm doing this. The reason that it's out there is because you want them to say, can you give me an example? Or you could say, I'm happiest giving you the tools you need. When it comes to finance, what is it that keeps you up at night? So these value propositions, whether they be in your LinkedIn profile or your resume, are templates for outstanding interviews. And it's all based on the same way you were successful to begin with, and the same way that the guy you're talking to was successful. It's focused on that conversation, just as Simeon said, how specifically can I help you?
Right. Gotcha. And then the last piece that we talked about earlier on about what is content is it's your thought leadership. All of you are senior executives, BlueSteps members. What do you think your companies pay you for, right? I don't think they pay you for your fingers and your typing speed. They're paying you for your point of view. What is your perspective on X, right? The market, the future, this project, like guide us. We need your wisdom there, right? We don't need the fact that you can type fast. It doesn't help. We've got many people doing that. We need your point of view. I'm going to pay you for that. So there's a couple of things in LinkedIn that kind of are my pet peeve. Okay. And forgive me for offending I do these things too as well, but I just wanted to point this out. Here's some differences where as a recruiter or someone who's interested in finding out more about people in the community I'm interested in, when I see these examples, this is what I think, okay? So the left-hand side there is something that I might do. I might forward someone's article here. This guy's name is Dirk Z. He's very vocal about AI. And then he's got really fancy graphics. And a lot of people will forward this and make a little comment behind that. Okay. Now, there's nothing wrong with that because there might be some really good content here. People need to see that. I can tell you in a second about some stats around LinkedIn first. That's going to be, it's very interesting to you. It will be interesting to you about the stats, about the reach. If you're trying to engage people in LinkedIn, a conversation, this is not the way to go. I'll talk about that in a second. That's a follower. A thinker is someone, I published something today about this on my LinkedIn. This is an AI post that I had posted a while back, but I was quoting someone else's thought. I was saying that, actually, who said this? Noam Chomsky, right? A well-known sociologist. And he said this about AI. And so you can kind of read that and squint at it if you would like. But that's a thinker. I mean, I thought about what he said and I kind of think, okay, well, how does that relate to what I do? And, why is that interesting to my audience? It's not exactly kind of chock full of a lot of stuff, but it compels you to think a little bit, right? And that's great. That's great. That's going to get you a little bit more reach. LinkedIn will kind of see that as a higher engagement. There's some thought behind that, and it'll get to more people. Okay. A thought leader is different. Thought leader takes content, facts, data, market intelligence, and tries to put things together and synthesize that and create something hopefully new. Okay. Now, I'm not showing off at all this, but this is kind of what my example is because that's what I try to do. My last post was about why AI will never replace us, Don, right? And then you'll see there, if you go on my LinkedIn, you'll see that these are the kind of specific points that I've read and I've thought about, right? So I'll give you an example. So the emergence of AI, the big question is, do we still exist? Because people can write their resumes in ChatGPT. But the problem is that AI can provide you, but it provides you with average. What I mean by that is, think about, large language modules. What does that mean? There's people that are feeding in tons and tons of documents so that when you type in something, it'll pull from that and generate a really beautiful document, right? But that's a law of averages. So basically you're saying that's the best way of doing things, right? But each one of you on this call are unique. You're unique in your personality and your leadership. So how in the world would you want to be represented by AI? Right. So this is what I was thinking. So a thought leader is taking something and sort of synthesizing and really pushing it out. Now imagine you take 5 of these on your LinkedIn and you think about your area that you're interested in and you just push it out there. It doesn't have to be this long, like 2 or 3 paragraphs. And you just say, from my experience, I think this is where the puck is going to go and we need to skate there, full stop. And I can say that because I'm an SVP, I'm a whatever it is, but that's different, right? And so LinkedIn as a algorithm pushes that out even further. And what I mean by that is, if you ever think about why do you even do this? Why do you forward things? Why do you think? It's because you're trying to get some engagement, right? You want people to read it, right? If there's no audience there, you wouldn't do this.